Hello, and welcome to the Practice Marketing Podcast, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics and experts so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. Hi, I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions. And today's focus, we're going to talk about 7 terrible mistakes that kill morale and lead to high staff turnover. And so let's face it, in today's economy, in today's marketplace, especially in healthcare, in PT practices, chiropractices, healthcare practices, it's hard to get people in. And so we want to work very hard to retain the people that we have, and when we grow, to be able to attract new people to us. So let's talk about what can kill morale here. And we're going to go through 7 different things here, and you can apply these in your practice and think about how that you're using them and avoiding some of these things here, what you're doing to change the way that you are operating so that you can retain your staff. So first off is absence of clear expectations. So this is something you want to set from the get-go. And sometimes you have to come back with people who have been with you for years and just say, hey, look, let's come back to what are we all about here, and make sure that there's an alignment there of expectations, because that's where it's very easy for things to go off the rails. And when you have a different expectation and think, hey, this person should just know this, you don't know that, right? And on their end, they may have a slightly different expectation or perception of what they're responsible for. And it's when you have those mismatches, that's when you run into trouble, right? So you got to make sure that you have clear expectations. First off is really getting clear on what is their main purpose there, right? So let's just take a physical therapist, for example. So the main purpose is to deliver awesome care that gets people results, right? And gets them better. And then secondary expectations, right? You got to set expectations. Hey, I need you to be able to show up at work before you're ready to go for your appointment, so you're all ready to go. I need you to document, thoroughly completed by the end of the day. I need you to have your discharge reports done within the 3 days from the last visit. Whatever your expectations are in the clinic, make sure that's written out, given to the employee, and that you go over them together so that there is a clear expectation of what their purpose is, what their secondary expectations are. Also go over what key metrics that they're responsible for. So it's not that, hey, we're just going to measure how many cancels that you get, right? Or how many people show up for their visits on your schedule. It's like you're responsible for getting, your patients there in coordination with the front desk. You need to see your patients for their prescribed number of visits, right? So that's a responsibility of the physical therapist. So you need to make sure that they have metrics around that they understand that those are the metrics that they're responsible for. And like I said, you want to make sure that those are in writing, especially when they're onboarding. Make sure that's signed off by the individual. It's something that you can come back to on performance reviews too. Just make sure you're both in alignment of the purpose and the expectations that are set. All right, the second one here that you want to be looking out for that can crush morale is lack of guidance from managers. So what we find is that people just do their best work when they're accountable to someone else for their actions. So it's very easy when you have some great performing staff to just let them be and let them do their thing. And you want to be able to do that to a certain amount, but you want to make sure that they still have a very good communication, very good connection with someone they're responsible to, right? Now, whether that's you as the owner of the practice or whether you have a director of the clinic that they're responsible to, or a manager, you want to make sure that they are accountable to a manager, right? And so, you can have what I've seen happen in my career is that you have great people that start off with good intentions, but they can go off the rails without accountability. So if you haven't, if you're not someone that checks up with them frequently, or your manager doesn't really check with them frequency, they can start to go a little sour, right? And that compounds over time. And then what started off as a good relationship ends in a struggling relationship. So make sure that from the start that there's good accountability with the employee and their manager. And the thing there is to set goals together, right? So what do you want to work on? Here's what I need to see from you. We aligned on those things. Let's set some goals together. Let's come back and make sure we revisit those goals. And then that's a check-in that's being done. And so ideally what you want to do is have a monthly one-on-one check-in with that employee, like 30 minutes or so, And that's the time for them to let you know how things are going, right? So here's like what's going well, what are the things that you're struggling with, and what do you want to work on for this next month, right? So that's a great opportunity to get feedback from the employee, give feedback to them, but it's really more for the employee as that check-in. And then on a quarterly review, do more of a performance feedback, right? And then so you're not waiting like a whole year to give a whole large performance feedback, right? It's really good to do that on a quarterly basis. So one-on-one check-ins on a monthly basis, and then you'd have two of those, and then the third one would be a quarterly review, so maybe a touch longer, and that's when the manager gives more feedback in terms of performance, right? So the third one here that can crush morale is micromanagement. So no one likes to be micromanaged, but that does come back to accountability. So this can go two ways. It could be one that the manager is not feeling that they can trust the employee. They're just not getting it. They have to keep looking over their shoulder. And that can probably come from poor training, right? Sometimes it's just that the person may not have the best skill set for that role or that job, and they may not be the right fit. But most times it is actually just they never got trained properly from the get-go on that particular thing, and you thought that they got it, but they keep making mistakes, so you have to keep coming back. So do they need to go through like a proper retraining on that thing that you're trying to get? So like front desk, for example, do they need to go back through training on how to do certain calls and how they're going to answer the call for a new prospect coming in? So that might be just the case there, and just need some training, some coaching through that. So start with that first. But then the other flip side could be that the manager may be part of the problem. They have a fear of letting go. They have to be over everything, right? And they have to know exactly what's going on with every little thing. And that can be suffocating to the employee, right? So that's the micromanagement part there. And so then the manager needs to be retrained to feel confident and like, hey, let's set some goals, some expectations, show me that you can do this. And then there's this kind of weaning off process from the manager where they don't have to be breathing down the neck of the employee every single second to know what's going on, right? Maybe they need some more reports back to them to know what's going on, and that could really help that situation. So you got to be aware of that feedback from employees, if they're feeling micromanaged, or that feeling of them not paying attention to the manager. You can kind of sense that, you can kind of see it or feel it. So you want to look for that. And if that's happening, then just address it, right? Hey, do you feel this way? What's going on? Like, and then you can get a pulse on like they feel like they're doing a good job with their job and they're seeing things, they're just kind of being micromanaged, or that the manager doesn't feel like they're doing things and that needs to be retrained. The fourth one here is unequal treatment of employees. And so there's two sides to this. There's the legal unequal treatment, like you gave someone more days vacation than someone else, or you treated someone with a maternity leave one way and another one this way. And those things are, you kind of legally bound to treat everybody equally with certain benefits and things that you offer or that you do in the workplace. And then there's the subtle side, like you have some favorites in the office, and you spend some time, more with one employee because you like to joke around, they're friendly. And then the other one tends to be, a little bit more quiet and not someone that you have a big relationship with, right? So there's the subtle aspect of that too. But employees pick up on that and they're like, oh, Joe's the favorite over here. The manager really likes Joe. So I'll just say from experience, it's hard not to play favorites. We're human beings. We have friends. We make friendships in our workplace too. But you have to make a concerted effort to make sure that you do spend some time chatting with people who are a bit quieter, right, in the place, or sometimes maybe, not super, outgoing and friendly. They're just sort of quiet, or maybe they come off as a little bit harsh. Get to know them a little bit, just ask them some questions, right? And then that just shows in the office that you're not playing favorites with that, and that leads to people feeling more, included.
Do you want more freedom in your clinic? Then you need to work on your business, not just in it. The top practice owners know that they need a marketing system that consistently attracts patients from the internet. And at Practice Promotions, we've helped hundreds of practice owners skyrocket to the top of Google and get more new patients from online. Go to practicepromotions.net/kit to get our free practice marketing sample kit. It includes all our digital marketing tips and tricks that will get you new patients from Google. That's practicepromotions.net/kit, KIT, for a free marketing kit. And now back to the show.
And so you really have to look at it from the viewpoint of the employees, of how they perceive something before you act on it. And I've made mistakes here. I'll just tell you from the get-go, like I've made mistakes where like, hey, this is a great idea. I want to, do something for this one, department, and we're gonna, put that out there. And then all of a sudden the other departments are grumbling like, hey, that I didn't do that for us. Why not do that for us? And it's like, shoot, I didn't really look at it from their perspective of how they would see it. Because one thing to understand in business is that everybody talks, right? So even though you might be having, hey, this is the way that we're going to handle it with this one department, you got to realize that it's going to get out, it's going to get talked to without the with the other departments. And it's just one of those things where you got to look at it from all perspectives first and how it's going to be perceived, not necessarily the way that you just communicate it. Which leads us into our fifth one here, which is poor communication. So that can really crush morale if there's poor communication. So we really see this as like the number one issue for employees quitting, and that's not feeling heard, right? So it's not like, hey, let me talk about my feelings kind of hurt. It's like, if they came up with an idea, make sure that you really say, hey, I understand that idea. Thank you for, recommending that. You may not implement it, but at least it was heard by them and they brought it up. So we want to make sure that we're really working to foster communication all the time with our employees. And you can do this through weekly department meetings. It doesn't mean that you as the owner have to have, weekly meetings with all your staff. If you're small, that's a great idea. If you're a little bit bigger and it's harder to do, your manager should be leading those weekly department meetings. So like per clinic location, there should be a weekly meeting, a weekly huddle from those, or maybe you have it in your office department, right? And your therapists have another one, right? But there should be some sort of weekly meeting where there's fostering of communication that's being done. And so this is good for the managers to know too. Like if you see an employee that doesn't really communicate that well, ask them more questions. Be purposeful in getting them to open up, right? Get them to talk more. And there's been plenty of employees that we've had that are very quiet, that over time, just by getting them to say, hey, what do you think about this? It gets them to open up, right? And it's really cool to see that progress. And I will say that in that respect, like in our business, in practice promotions, I am more of the product guy. I'm more of the marketing mind person, and I love talking to people. But my wife, Amy, she is a superstar of talking to people and thinking about their way that they're feeling. And she's just, got that mind, right, of working with people. So you have to play to your strengths too with your managers in your business of who is really good at these kind of things and getting people to communicate. And some other people might be really good at metrics and management and those kind of things. So just leverage your strengths there with the people that you have, right? The other thing too with communication is like if you ask an employee to do something, right, or you say something, or like, hey, this is where we're going to do things now, this is our policy change, or this is the way that we're going to do something across the front desk now, whatever it may be, make sure that you try to give them a written follow-up on that, because we all retain like 20% of what we hear. So 80% goes, out the window. And so if it's written down, at least it's another way of getting that information. It kind of strengthens that change in policy or that whatever was said. So I would definitely make sure that there's that prevents misunderstandings also if there's written and you can go back to it. Heck, you as the owner or manager said one thing and then you change your mind a few months later, and then the employee's like, well, I thought we were doing it this way. That it's not my fault. And then if there's something written down, you're like, shoot, you as the owner, hey, we were doing it that way. I'm sorry, right? So you can have those kind of communications too. It happens, which leads us into our sixth one here, which is broken promises. So when you say, to an employee like, hey, you're going to get some sort of training or we're going to work on this sort of thing, and then you don't do it, well, then you're broken a promise, right? And it could be a little one or it could be a big one. It doesn't have to be a big one. A lot of little broken promises lead to just the employee not saying like, I don't believe what, we're going to do this thing now. Like nothing ever comes to fruition with what, the owner had said. So you want to make sure that you honor your promises, right? And so, if you said, hey, I want you to get better at, training back. We can do some back training courses. Make sure you document that. Make sure you put it on a calendar. Make sure there's a plan of action to get that therapist better at, backs, right? That could be an example. Um, here's the thing: if you don't follow through on what you promise, you do break that trust and break that communication. So again, it could be like micro breaks, but you do enough of those over time, and you lead to poor communication, and then that again leads to low morale in the office. So um, the other flip side here is that as an owner, sometimes we say things to keep people on, right? Or we're like, we don't want to lose them, or we don't want to make them feel upset. So, but I can tell you from experience, one of the things here is don't promise something to make someone else happy. Like, hey, you'll be a manager one day, right? Or you'll be this. And, you don't really have a full intention behind that. So again, you're making a promise on something that the other person can really take to heart, and then you break it, right? So want to make sure that you're not saying things just to make someone else happy about that. And this kind of leads into this other thought here, which is like not everyone really is manager material. So in in your practice with your therapist, for example, don't say, hey, the next step up for you is being a manager. Like that person may not be really good at managing other people. They may be an incredible therapist, right? And the goal there would be to become a master at their job. They could be a resource for other therapists, and they could maybe be part of a mentorship program, or there's other jobs and roles that they could be really good at. But what happens is you put them in a manager role where now they have to get others to get the work done, and they're not comfortable with that. They're not good at that, and then they fail and they go out the door, right? So make sure that when you're promising things that you're not necessarily saying, hey, you're going to be a manager one day. We want you to get to be really, really good at this particular thing here in your job, right? And we want to expand, we want to bring an internship, a mentorship program. Would that be something that interests you, excites you? Yeah, it's great. So you could talk about those different things too. Which leads us to our final step here in morale killers, and that is our number one killer of morale, which is lack of production, right? And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Well, have you ever noticed when it's busy in the clinic, people are genuinely happier? I mean, I'm not talking when they're like stressed out of their mind. I'm talking when they're just busy, right? You can feel it in the office. There's a lot of activity. People are happy. There's a buzz going on. And then have you seen it when it's slow? People are generally unhappy, or they're kind of worried, they're bored, there's things happening like that. So it comes back to this concept here of that production equals morale, right? And so the number one kill of morale is really lack of production. And so if you've ever had that day where you got a lot of stuff done, you're like, yeah, it was a great day, right? I got a lot of things done, that you felt good, right? And you've had those days where you had a lot to do, but you didn't get anything done. You feel kind of crappy at the end of the day, right? And that's just the basis of that production equals morale. So if it is a little slower in the clinic, you have to keep your team busy. You have to keep getting them little wins, little dones, right? And if it's slow, you need to shift gears and say, hey, we need to do these things. What can you do to be doing to help make it busier, right? We need to outflow calls. We need to get emails out, letters, evaluations, progress reports. Like, let's get stuff out. Let's be calling people. Let's be following up with our patients, right? And so they feel good when they call people, and then, 1 out of 10 calls, they get a person to come back in, right? Or a person to say, hey, look, I needed to get follow up anyway. They feel great about that, right? So what can you do to get your team busy, especially if it's a little slow? You might need to delegate some things for them to do, and give them a target like, hey, I want you to call 20 of your past patients today and see how they're doing, right? So people, again, they feel good when they see their actions really contribute to a very productive and positive day. So that's something you want to foster overall in your clinic, not just when it's slow, but when they see what they did contributed to the productivity of the whole clinic, right? So you got to acknowledge people when, hey, I saw you got a full schedule today. How did it go? Oh, that's fantastic. You got some great wins from your patients. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Look, that really helped us have a stellar day today. You know, this is one of our busiest days that we've had all month. That employee is going to feel good about that, right? And so you're pushing productivity, you're pushing morale that way. And so the other thing to think about here is that marketing boosts morale, right? Because marketing gets you more productive in the clinic, gets people busier, and when to keep those slots full for your therapists, make sure there's plenty of patients coming in. So there's things too that like you can get your team helping you out with marketing actions, follow-up calls. They could be going out to an event or something like that too. People love to do those kind of little things. So that's going to help fill your clinic, right? Push it on marketing, and that's going to ultimately boost morale. So I hope these tips helped you here think about what you can be shifting, slightly things that you can be doing in the clinic to just make it that go a long way, really, to boosting morale. And when you can keep morale high in the office and everybody's winning, that's going to have a huge impact on staff turnover. People are not going to be leaving when they're in a place that they feel connected to. So I hope these tips help you. Again, this is Neil Trickett from Practice Promotions, and I'm wishing you much success in your practice.
Thank you for listening to the Practice Marketing Podcast. Don't forget to get your free practice marketing sample kit at practicepromotions.net/kit. Start 2024 off the right way by building marketing systems that automatically attract new patients from online. That's practicepromotions.net/kit.